Let us imagine some wise men traveling through endless deserts, guided solely by a mysterious star. They are not kings, but they are also hombres comunes y corrientes. They come from ancient lands, from different cultures, with a purpose that defies logic, to worship a new baby born in a small village called Belen. What brings them there? What do they know that nothing else seems to understand? Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, a powerful king is dominated by fear. A simple rumor about the birth of a king of the Jews disturbs him, leading to the point of plotting against a baby. The city enters into an uproar. The sky is open, but not everyone wants to listen. This is not just a Christmas story. It's a journey of faith, conflict, adoration, and divine revelation. A confrontation between the sincere search for God and the resistance of human power. And everyone starts with a star that shines in the east. Matthew 2:1 says, "When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, some time before King Herod, some wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem." This verse marks the beginning of one of the most symbolic passages in the account of the birth of Christ. In short, it situates us geographically, politically, and spiritually in the context of the birth of the Messias. Belén de Judea is specifically mentioned because it is not just a place, but a deeply symbolic city for the Jewish pueblo. It was the city of David, the most venerated king in the history of Israel, and the prophecy of Micah 5:2 indicated that from Bethlehem came the ruler who would shepherd Israel. Thus, by registering that Jesus was born in Belen, Matthew is affirming that he fulfilled the messianic promises made by the prophets of the Old Testament. Herod's reign is also an important point. Herod was a king placed on the throne by the Romans and even ruled over the Jews. He was not a Jew by birth, but an equal. His government is marked by paranoia, intrigue, and persecution of any possible threat to his throne. The birth of a king of the Jews represented a direct threat to his authority, which would trigger tragic events in the following verses, such as the killing of the innocent. The arrival of the Magos de Oriente brings another very rich element to the narration. The word magi in the original Greek is magoi, which can refer to wise men, astrologers, or priests. They were scholars of science and nature, probably coming from Persia or Babylon, cultures in which astronomical and spiritual knowledge was highly valued. Even though they were not Jewish, and therefore kind, these men were attentive to the heavenly signs that announced something great. The star came, and recognizing its importance, began a long journey in search of the newly born king. The presence of the Magi has a profound theological meaning. The salvation betrayed by Jesus would not only be for the Jews, but for all nations. Since the birth of Christ, the gospel message has been inclusive, universal, and accessible to all those who, with a sincere heart, seek the truth. Furthermore, the knowledge that the Magi searched for the King of the Jews, and in just an astronomical phenomenon, demonstrated that God could use elements of creation, such as a star, to reveal his plan to those who were attentive. Thus, this verse reveals that from the beginning, Jesus came as a light to illuminate all the people, Judeos and Gentiles, and that the promise of the Messias transcends borders, cultures, and religions. Matthew 2:2 presents us to the wise men of the East asking, "Where is the King of the Jews who was born? Because we saw his star in the east and came to worship him." This statement is impactful for several reasons. Firstly, it reveals that these wise men, coming from different lands and traditions, distinct from Judaism, have identified by means of a celestial sign, a star, who was born someone of utmost importance. He is the King of the Jews. This expression was not commonly used lightly. In the context of Jewish pueblo, the expected king was the Messiah promised by the Scriptures, the descendant of David, who would establish the eternal kingdom of God. The star, therefore, was not simply an astronomical phenomenon, but a clear symbol of divine guidance. It was God who allowed these wise men to identify the sign in the sky so that they came from the east to pay homage to the newly born. The knowledge that his intention was not simply to see him, but to worship him, highlights the recognition of his spiritual and divine authority. The magicians were not Jews, but their act of adoration underlined the universality of Christ's message. I did not come alone for Israel, but for all the towns, languages, and nations. Matthew 2:3 continues saying, Here I am, King Herod is in turmoil, and all of Jerusalem is with him. This verse introduces us to the ongoing conflict. Herod was an insecure and cruel ruler, obsessed with power. When he heard that a new king of the Jews had been born, he interpreted this as a direct threat to his throne. He did not understand that Jesus' reign was not political, but spiritual. Its turmoil extended to all of Jerusalem, on the ground because Herod was feared, but because any instability in power could cause chaos, repression, or violence. Thus, the birth of Jesus, although an event of salvation and hope, also provoked opposition from the beginning. El Messias arrives at the world, but without facing the resistance of the powerful from an early age. This contrast between the adoration of the wise men and the fear of Herod anticipates the role of Jesus as a light that shines amidst the darkness of the world. In Matthew 2:3 we read, When he saw King Herod, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem was with him. This brief phrase reveals or begins a tension that deeply marks the story of Jesus' birth. Herod, known for his paranoia and cruelty, sees the news of the birth of the King of the Jews, not as a divine promise, but as a direct threat to his throne. Even though Jesus was only a child, Herod feared losing power, as his political position was constantly challenged by internal conflicts and disputes within the kingdom. The word turbo suggests a state of intense restlessness. It was not a simple concern, but a profound alarm that also affected all of Jerusalem. This indicates that the city knew how dangerous Herod's wrath could be. The Pueblo feared that any disturbance to its ego could trigger violent retaliations, something that history further confirms with the infamous slaughter of the innocent. Matthew 2:16. In Matthew 2:4, Herod, seeking precise information about the birth of the Messiah, summons the chief priests and scribes of the village. And summoning all the chief priests and scribes of the Pueblo, they asked where the Christ was born. These religious leaders were experts in the Hebrew scriptures. They knew that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, as prophesied by the prophet Micah. However, this scene shows a strong contrast. While the wise men of the East sought the child to worship him with sincerity, Herod manipulated the sacred knowledge to try to destroy him. His question was not one of faith, but of strategy. He used religion as a political tool, revealing the hypocrisy of his heart. Matthew 2:5-6 records the response of the priests and scribes. They said, In Bethlehem of Judea, for it is written by the prophet, You, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are in no way smaller among the princes of Judah, because from you there will be a guide who will guide my little Israel. Here they quote Micah 5:2, confirming that Belen, despite being a small and insignificant village in human terms, was destined to be the hill of Salvador. This place, humble and without renown, would be the scene of an event that would change the history of humanity. The reference to a guide who will guide my village highlights the pastoral role of Jesus. He would not be a tyrant king like Herod, but a leader who cares, protects, and guides with love. Jesus, the Messias, would be the good shepherd of Israel, fulfilling the promises of God to his village. In Matthew 2:7-8, Herod follows with his strategy. Then Herod, calling in secret to the magicians, inquired of them diligently about the time since the appearance of the star. And sending them to Bethlehem, I said, Id Allah, and inquired with diligence about the child. And when he halay, he gave me knowledge, so that you can also see and adore him. This private meeting between Herodes and the wizards reveals their malicious intent. Pretending to be devoted, he tries to gain the trust of wise men so that he can inform the child's location. Herod did not want to worship Messiah, but to eliminate him. His desire to know the exact time at which the star appeared demonstrated his cold calculation. He wanted to determine the approximate age of the baby to execute his plan with precision. This act reveals the contrast between the hearts, a few lines of strength to worship the king, guided by faith. The other, being so close, seeks to destroy him, guided by fear and pride. The story of the magicians and Herodes, therefore, becomes a reflection of how the world responds to Jesus, some with adoration, others with rejection or violence. In Matthew 2:9-10, we find an exciting continuation of the journey of the Magi. The text says, Yal oir al king semashon, and here he is, the star that was seen in the east was left behind them, until I finally stood over the place where the baby was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with immense joy. These verses convey a powerful message about divine guidance, perseverance, and spiritual reward. After listening to Herod's instructions, who, as we have seen, hid bad intentions, the Magi left Jerusalem to Bethlehem. But he can't trust only the words of an earthly king. The star reappears in the sky, confirming that God continues to control his journey. The star, which initially prompted them to abandon their land, shines again as a sign of approval and guidance. This star was not a simple astronomical phenomenon. She represented the supernatural action of God, leading wise men from the earth to the Salvador of the world. Its renewed appearance symbolizes that even when there is human interference or moments of uncertainty, God's plan remains firm and active. The text highlights that the star stands before them, showing a clear path, and stops over the place where the baby Jesus is found. It is an image of divine precision and care. God alone guides us from the ground, a bell that leads with precision to those who seek him sincerely. Los Magos, wise and erudite, recognized him and, when he saw the star again, reacted with great joy. This joy is deep in the emotional and spiritual realm. It is the joy of those who realize that they are facing the fulfillment of something much greater than any human expectation. They are about to meet the Messiah, the one who had been promised by the scriptures and who would bring salvation to the world. This scene invites us to trust in divine guidance, even when the path seems uncertain. God is faithful to guide those who search with a sincere heart, and the joy that results from this search is full and transformative. Matthew 2:11-12 presents us with the culminating point of the journey of the Magi. When they entered the house, they met their baby with his mother Mary, and postrándose, he loved it. And opening his treasures, he offered gifts, gold, incense, and myrrh. And they warned us that they would not return to Herod, they would return to their country by another path. Upon meeting the Niño Jesus with Maria, the Magi king stood in adoration. This gesture is profound. Men of prestige and knowledge, coming from distant lands, bow before a child, recognizing their royalty and divinity. It wasn't just any visit, it was just a spiritual encounter. I was not simply before a king of the Jews, but before the incarnate Hijo de Dios. Luego offers three significant benefits: gold, symbol of royalty, recognizing Jesus as king; incense, used in cult rituals, symbolizing his divinity; myrrh, a substance used to embalm bodies, which prophetically points to the suffering and the death that would face Jesus. Each gift is loaded with symbolism and reinforces the spiritual understanding that the Magi had this child's identity. On the ground, they were honoring an important newborn. They worshipped the promised Messiah, the Salvador of the world. Furthermore, verse 12 shows that God continues to act actively. The Magi are warned not to return to Herod. This divine intervention protects the plan of salvation. They obeyed promptly and returned to another route, frustrating the king's plans and demonstrating that none of the powerful of the earth, like Herod, could prevent God's designs. This journey concludes the narrative of the Magi in an inspiring way. Your search was rewarded with the revelation of Christ. His adoration was genuine, and his obedience to the signs of God was immediate. His story is an invitation for everyone, regardless of their origin or culture, to seek the truth with faith and humility, recognize the sovereignty of Christ, and be attentive to the voice of God.